more than anything, children are looking for that connection and that stability and support. We don't, as adults, recognize how important that is, but as children, their primary caregiver is the gospel. And so if you say it's going to be okay, then it's going to be okay.
A new school year begins later this month. While the start of a new year typically causes some anxiety, especially for younger children, after spending a good deal of the last school year working remotely due to the pandemic, anxiety levels will probably be running much higher. A K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist says that parents and caregivers can help children transition back to school by being invested and responsive to what they're feeling. On today's Sound Living, coping with back-to-school anxiety. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles says the disruptions created by the pandemic has created uncertainty, which causes anxiety. To help children prepare for going back to school, he says that parents should try to explain what's going on and tell them that it's normal to have some apprehension, uncertainty, and even fear about returning to the classroom. Bradford, another school year rapidly approaching, and for those in preschool and maybe kindergarten through second grade, this is somewhat new for some of them, and actually for a lot of them it's going to feel new because it's been a long time since some of them have been in a classroom, and they may be apprehensive.
Yeah, without question, one of the biggest elements of early childhood development at all is transitions. And we know that they're hard for children. And in the context of the pandemic and for different school districts, there are different approaches. There have been hybrid models. There have been work-from-home models. And then there have been in-class models with guards and masks, et cetera. So there's going to be differences when children return to school, regardless. They already have this generalized underlying anxiety about going back to school. We all did. It's new. It's different. But then layering on top the uncertainty associated with what school is going to look like, who's going to be there, who's not, that can really cause some difficulties for children to process what's going on. And so it will be more than our typical back-to-school time this year as a consequence of the pandemic and us hopefully coming out of that and being able to plan for what that looks like both at the individual and family levels.
A lot of times we kind of rely on the administration and the teachers to kind of lead the way, but it sounds like maybe this year parents should be a little bit more involved in making sure that their children are ready to go back.
That is absolutely the case. Of all the times that we need parents to be really responsive and really invested in what their child or children are feeling, it's right now. And we as adults tend to think about thoughts as opposed to emotions a little bit more. But having parents really have conversations about feelings, about what their anxieties are, and you don't want to call it anxieties, right? You want to say, what are you afraid of? Or, is there something I can do to help you understand what's going on? And you also, as an adult, have to be okay with uncertainty, which is a trick, right? That's hard. It's hard for all of us. And so when we think about being okay with uncertainty, we need to convey that and model that for our children. If I, have one really strong word of advice, it's the model that behavior and those discussions and being able to admit to yourself when you're also anxious and admit to your child that there are things that are uncertain that make you uncomfortable too, but that you'll be there for your child and that you will do it together, that you'll work through it together, and that your role is to keep them safe and to help them grow. That will not only reinstill that in you as an individual parent, but also will provide them with that support that they really are looking for when their emotions are getting the better of them, when they're feeling anxious, when they're acting out. Oftentimes it's really because they're just not able to get that sense of security that parents especially can offer.
That's an important point because I think there are a lot of parents who are uncertain right now and are anxious themselves, and it's okay to display a little bit of that, but maybe not a whole lot of that.
Yeah, so you don't want to go overboard, of course. You want to talk about how you're feeling, but not so much show that anxiety. if that happens and your child happens to notice that you're running around the kitchen reorganizing everything because you're feeling anxious, then fine, you can address that. But really, children can learn a ton through developmentally appropriate, so age-appropriate conversations. So being able to tell your 3-year-old that you're a little scared too. It's okay to be scared. What do we do when we're scared? Well, we try to take deep breaths. We try to think about things that aren't scary. We try to work through and talk through the things that are making us scared and figure out what we'll do when we get to those things, right? So if school is making you scared, we can talk through about, well, if you're able, I'll drop you off, or I will be there to take you to the school bus and I'll be here when you get back. Really diving into what those things are. And sometimes children just can't tell you, right? They're just scared. And that's okay too. The best response is if you're scared to say, I'm scared too. We'll get through this together. More than anything, children are looking for that connection and that stability and support. We don't, as adults, recognize how important that is. But as children, their primary caregiver is the gospel, right? And so if you say it's going to be okay, then it's going to be okay. That's not to say, though, that you don't want to pay attention to emotions and be okay. If you're sad and your child's sad, it is okay to say that you're sad and to cry or hug one another. That's perfectly okay. We don't want to fool children into thinking that we can protect them from anything and everything, but we also want to ease their minds about those things. So I would recommend for parents of younger children, you don't want to burden them with your own emotional state, but you do want to offer the recognition of a shared experience, of a shared understanding. It would be best for children to see you understanding them without you expressing your own, if you will, outsized anxieties, because to them, emotions are gigantic when they come from adults.
I know by and large most parents like to do the back-to-school shopping by themselves. Without the children, it's a little easier, but would this maybe be an opportunity this year to get them a little bit more excited about school, to get them a little bit more engaged by taking them along, at least on a short trip, to maybe get a few school things?
Yes, particularly because the transition is going to be difficult, and so being able to do that part, and I concur, chunking that into things that you're willing and able to do with your child versus things that you need to do when you're on your own is a really good strategy. I recognize that many parents can't do that, but if you are able, absolutely, being able to do some of the more tailored to your child purchasing, so what their folders are going to look like or what their pencils are going to look like can be really fun, and really you can leverage that as an opportunity to talk about hopes, dreams, fears, and transition. That's really the context for having that conversation. But you don't want to try to go back to school shopping. Let's say you have 4 kids in your house with all 4 kids all at once. You'll sprout gray hairs immediately. So within reason, if you can make the pre-back-to-school activities part of their preparation, that would be ideal.
Uncertainty is going to come into play here. There's also some things that parents can probably do to help with the transition and the decisions that need to be made, and that is all things that they probably want to start working on right away because it is a time frame that really is set, so you can't push that back.
Yeah, that's right. In so many other domains of our lives, we can, move things around, push things back. This one, no, right? School starts, and that's the day it starts. So, yeah, making decisions about what school is going to look like are still going on right now. And then, choices that parents are going to make that they would ordinarily make anyway in some cases, right? So who's going to pick up? Who's going to drop off? If they need an after-school program, is that available? Is my slot still there even though I didn't use it last year, right? So all of these things. And now is sort of the time to really get those elements nailed down, those logistical elements, because things have changed. Things are in flux. There are plenty of people who had jobs before the pandemic who have switched jobs. And so those professionals might not be in those same spots. So you might need to spend a little bit more time looking or making connections with new people. And so there's a lot of the transition. And for children, transitions are hard, but that doesn't mean that it's super easy for adults either, right? I don't know anybody who truly likes to be absolutely surprised, particularly with tasks that are onerous. And so what you want is to be strategic in planning and recognize that there's still going to be uncertainty for you too. We don't know if schools are going to be completely open. We don't know if schools are going to have mask mandates or not. We know a few things, I think. I think we all understand that in Kansas, at least, there's not going to be the remote option through public schools. And so it's really up to parents to try to plan the best they can for the unknown. And that's what children are trying to do too. It's up to us as primary caregivers to help them transition from a more certain world to a more uncertain one in the school. Once school starts going, that certainty starts to build and build and build. But those first couple of weeks can be really, really hard. And they're just going to be a little bit harder this year.
For those who have not been having any in-person contact for a while, socialization a big part of the learning process for this age group that we're focusing on today. So what might be some advice that parents can give to their kids who are maybe a little apprehensive? They're wondering, how do I do this? What am I supposed to do? How close am I supposed to be? What's the interaction supposed to be like?
Yeah, it's such an important element of children going back to school and being around other kids. And it really is guided by, first, the parents or primary caregivers' expectations for contact with their children, and then also what the school's expectations are, right? So how do the expectations for parents match up for those at school or preschool, for that matter, or childcare? And typically, what we have seen is for children who haven't been around other children for a while, they're slower to warm up. They will observe from afar and then start to come back in. For parents, it would be really important to have conversations with their teachers or their caregivers to let them know essentially where their child is coming from, what they have been experiencing before they came into school, and then help them identify if there are areas where you can have conversations or the teacher might be able to focus a little bit more on those connections for children and making everyone feel safe and included. It's going to take time. That we know so much about social emotional learning and how kids learn about their worlds through each other. And if they don't have that, and if they did, everyone was wearing a mask, that can be a difficult thing too, because we learn from each other, from our facial expressions, from seeing each other's mouths move, and all of those elements of human communication. And so it won't be surprising that teachers and parents are going to need to work together to really build a bridge from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic school.
I'm sure that a lot of parents are going to pick up their children the first few days of school and they're going to say, "How was school?" And they're going to say, "Fine." And that's going to be the end of it. We need to ask them a little bit better questions if we want real answers, right?
Absolutely. So asking questions like, what did you do at school today? One of the things that we do a lot is, what was your favorite part of school today? And sometimes bad favorite part comes up, and that's okay. So extending that thinking and extending that learning about what's going on is really, really helpful. And in fact, there's been some really cool research about recall of lessons taught at school when parents ask their children about what happened at school. So you might not get that they focused exactly on, an isosceles triangle, for example, but children who have conversations about what happened at school are able to recall that information from those settings and apply it in testing and evaluations. So open-ended questions are your friend, and also sharing back with them. So having a dialogue, right? Nobody likes to be quizzed. So, hey, what was your favorite part about today? I learned about isosceles triangles. Oh, cool. Well, yeah, my favorite part was coming to pick you up, or I got to go see a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time, right? So again, modeling and helping them understand that it's not a quiz, that it's a non-threatening, no value element of a discussion, that you're connecting. And if we approach it that way, we're going to be in really good shape.
That's K-State Research and Extension Child Development Specialist Bradford Wiles. More information on parenting and child development is available at county and district extension offices and online at ksre.ksu.edu. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.